Oh,
This is cool.
yeah, this is kind of pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it recording?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So where are we gonna dive into tonight?
Yeah. I think just talking about all of it. The human movement, the human therapy movement, how for us, like, our connection came to be so that we could kind of start to build this. Because there's so many things that we're putting out there, but
Yeah.
it's like the foundation is so deep. There's so many layers to it that just don't really get seen.
Maybe what we could do to start this off,
Yeah.
is we kind of did this on the site, is we kind of tried to dive into how the human therapy movement kind of came to be
Yeah.
based upon our connection, but
Yeah.
also kind of a little bit of our story.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're cool with that.
Yeah, totally.
And how we kind of got here
Totally.
to this place.
Yeah. How does that feel to kind of go in there?
I'm good with it all.
Me too.
Yeah. Do you wanna stab first? Or do you want me to dive in?
Go for it.
Yeah. Pass the vibe.
Yeah.
Where do we start? I think I start back to the beginning for me.
Yeah.
Beginning for me was really trying to find my own voice,
Yeah.
and I think you lose your voice along the way, especially growing up.
Yeah.
At least for me, I was just trying to survive, try to fit in, right, as best as possible. And really for me, my first interaction, which, I don't like the subtitle, the medical definition of just psychotherapy being this treatment that alleviates or reduces or eliminates symptoms.
Right.
For me, my first interaction with
So medicalized.
psychological treatment was really self-discovery,
Yeah.
like figuring out who I was.
Yeah.
And I think that, from what I understood from Rogers, was the basis he was saying for everything, is that underneath, depression, anxiety, trauma, OCD, like all these containers that clients come in only seeing themselves
Right.
through the medical model
Through that
has
lens.
told them. Yeah. And for me, I guess I had internalized my own lenses: deviant kid, alcoholic, addict, tons of things, depressed,
Yeah.
chronically traumatized.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got kicked out of high school and went to an addiction center
Right.
that I landed myself in an assessment. And,
Right.
outside child psychologists,
Yeah.
that, very different when you're a kid. Like,
Yeah.
as a young budding adult, it was just very different for me to
Yeah.
be sitting across the room with a complete stranger,
Yeah. That makes sense.
fully expecting this person is got a checklist and is checking
Right.
off and is going to
Prepared to put you in boxes.
yeah, is going to ask me the most vulnerable questions
Right.
about my life,
Right.
and I'm going to have to, a part of me, anticipate his every move of where we're going, because there's
Yeah.
things I've never muttered on the outside to anyone or myself, and so
Such a vulnerable moment, eh? Like.
yeah. And you know what's really kind of messed up about this situation is, ironically, at this treatment center,
Yeah.
he's now the president of the treatment center that I went to.
You're a therapist.
Now today,
Okay.
but when I first met him, I was his first client as a master
I
intern
remember
student.
you saying this. Yeah.
So, not that I was the ideal client. Like, I was
Yeah.
literally like distracted, head on the desk, tired, grumpy, not wanting to be there.
The opposite of the ideal
Yeah,
client, really.
yeah. Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
I was just being prepared that someone else was about to tell me
You were prepared.
some profound advice about my life
Right.
and how I'm deficient,
Right.
something I already kind of knew on the outside,
Right.
and that I have to work really super hard to get where I need to be going. And
Wow.
the interesting thing is, because he actually was just starting his theory class in internship, he didn't actually know how to practice treatment protocols. Whereas, research says now that students, stick pretty heavy to protocol, because to go to the messiness in psychotherapy,
Yeah.
it's dark, it's heavy for therapy.
It's scary.
It's absolutely scary.
Overwhelming.
But the interesting thing is that when I was with this person,
Yeah.
he wasn't giving me advice because he had really nothing to give. So what he did was he defaulted to just being a human,
Yes.
telling me he didn't have the answer,
Yes.
telling me he wasn't going to judge me, giving me space
Yeah.
allowing me to explore in the darkness. And
So
yeah,
powerful.
it was pretty scary on the
Yeah.
dive board, not
Yeah.
being rescued or told,
Right.
but I found myself in that darkness.
That was exactly what you needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting? I thought that's what psychotherapy was.
Right.
Because I felt it and I found my own voice by him not talking over me. Because
Yeah.
he didn't have a voice to share. He inadvertently allowed me to fill up the dead space.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
my first introduction to, I don't think humanism, I think just genuine, authentic,
Right.
all the common factors we know in research
Yeah.
to be the best factors for us.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with techniques or
Right.
fancy coping strategies, pre-internet when everything was available.
Right. Yeah.
Just basic humanism.
yeah.
Listening, validating,
Yeah.
not making it about him,
Yeah.
and allowing me to explore some of the darkest places in myself.
I love that. One thing that hits me as you speak to it is the piece of like, so we all go to these like methods right away because it's scary. That's what we were saying around that piece of like, okay, it's scary. So usually what you have doesn't happen because the therapist comes in and they have a very prescribed method. It's CBT, it's whatever it is. Here is what happens week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. It's so regimented. And so you don't get the experience that you had that was such a breakthrough experience for you. And I think what hits me as we speak about that is like the amount of fear that is there as therapists and in this industry that we don't acknowledge. We present as the expert, the one who knows, but really there's underneath that we're scared just like our clients are scared. There's
I totally believe that, and I think that what he taught me was being an expert in my own experience, but it was him basically dumping his own ego over ship and being a non-expert because he wasn't yet forced into the institution and of this pretentious science, but blocking out the art form of psychotherapy. So when I got into my first graduate class, I remember theories, the prof in there was, can everyone go around the class and everyone share a little bit about what's inspired you to psychotherapy, but any other theories that kind of draw you into the field, which is always an interesting question to ask in your master's class. I remember going first and saying like, hey, I want to kind of come in and build these connections with people like they've never had before and not give up on them and be authentic and really attachment based, relationship connection based stuff. And I remember everyone's kind of like bright eyed and looking at the, yeah, that sounds great, right? And I remember that first prof was like, Rogerian and person-centered and humanism, that we know that's just basic, that's essential.
Very dismissive.
But it's not enough.
Right.
If you want to operate gold standard treatment and you want to do well for clients and give them the best care and be ethically appropriate, then you're going to need some level of behavioral intervention, which I didn't know at the time meant I needed to prescribe to a medicalized model of seeing human beings that was sandwiched between psychodynamics and Rogerian, right? And so they were basically going back to the 70s of the CBT is the gold standard. So we need to treat this as an academic exercise. So I need to get you to conform to this and also start to see this message that you're somehow not enough.
Right.
And that the answer is out there.
Right.
And
You
you need to specialize. You need to become the expert. So what did I do for the first 10, 12 years of my career? I damn well became the expert. I grew the ranks of psychotherapy. I did lots of amazing feats, but I was always unhappy. And every time I'd bring it up to my clinical director or anything like that, and some of the trainings I would do, they would be like, "Oh no, that's imposter syndrome. Don't listen to that. It'll get better. You just need more experience. You just need more time. You need to be more of the expert." As Russ Harris often said in his ACT trainings, like it takes 2 to 3 years before you're feeling somewhat comfortable with all this ACT processing that you're doing in third wave behavioral therapy.
Right.
So I always felt that there must be a better version of the answer out there because
Right.
this is not working to everyone,
Right.
or I'm the imposter. And
Right.
the interesting thing is that I just over the last couple of years realized that my imposter syndrome was actually right. That this whole thing felt awkward. This felt like
there was something awkward for a reason.
because it wasn't I was awkward, it's the system's awkward.
That's it.
And now I'm going back to my roots where I started is
Yeah.
how can I bury my own ego
Yeah.
and my intelligence overboard so people can be the ones to find the answers themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool place, a really scary place
Yeah.
to be,
Yeah.
but a really cool place to be. And I think there is a lot of therapists like us that feel like they got to continue on these $30,000 educations in 3 years and IFS
Yeah.
lottery systems to be told by someone who's done a couple case studies
Yeah.
that they found this new
They
version
found
of
a
the answer.
way.
And people aren't actually looking for that.
Right.
Which people just want the thing that they've always missed is that secure attachment
Yeah.
that I had that I
Yeah.
finally found with someone else.
Yeah.
It's all we want when we're kids to find ourselves.
That's it. That's it.
And that's all what the common factors of research says,
Yeah.
which mostly are humanism.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Also,
I
we
love
go
that.
after we go to our story, but that's why
Yeah.
personally I think I found my connection with me to find a
Yeah.
connection with you, to find a connection with someone else.
That makes a lot of sense.
I know I'd
that.
love to hear your.
Yeah, I love that, and so many pieces to it. Like I wasn't awkward; the system is awkward. Like I think that's such an important component of this because it's like it's so easy to internalize with, and we talk about therapy. We talk everywhere in our society. It's so easy to internalize that like something wrong with me. I'm the problem.
Yeah.
Like everything. Look at everybody else. They seem to have it all. They seem to be doing well. It's so easy, and I feel like that view, this idea that there's these people who are doing well, and then there's all these troubled people, and we have these two groups in society, and we're like navigating that, and it's like,
It's so fucked up.
Yeah.
Even the people who make it farther in the light, who
Yeah.
become more experts. I
Yeah.
think we were challenging some ideas about Brene Brown, and
yeah,
I love a lot of her writing. And
yeah,
but when I rewatch her being authentic and what
Right.
that standard is, how you can be kind of the compass of the heart, the mastered lingos of all your emotions. There's
Yeah.
some expertise, and to me, true awkwardness, true authenticity
yeah.
is the awkwardness I see with clients.
This is it. It's kind of leaning in to that awkwardness,
It's
you're like,
being okay to being like, I don't know this question, or I'm going to lean over to this topic, and I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about this, and I'm kind of free associate with
Yeah.
this. Where when I watch the people on those TED Talks and
Yeah.
the leaders talking about authenticity, it seems scripted to me.
right,
It seems like
yeah,
this has been planned out. Where
Yeah.
even we set up this camera
Right.
in my basement, we just
Yeah.
dive the fuck in.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and to me, that's like
yeah,
it's interesting. That's kind of what it is.
right,
There's some shadow to the light. It's okay. You don't
Right.
have to. And I think a lot of therapists, a lot of me have bought into.
yes,
I'm just not enough. I'm an imposter because
yes,
I'm following something that there's actually no research behind and
Yeah.
actually doesn't work.
yeah. That's so interesting. It's
It
so
is.
interesting.
Yeah.
And you were like so. In terms of my story with it, and
Yeah.
it's something where it's like, I think it like the parts I focus on change at different moments in terms of like what strikes me the most. Where I've been thinking just the last couple days more, and the context of like the analytics of psychology is something that I think is so profoundly important. Like we talk about psychology in the context of science, but most of what we know in psychology and what we're told is, what the experts say about psychology is based off of this list of like these studies where it's like, okay, well, we did this study, we interviewed these 100 people or 1,000 people, and with a probability of 95%, 19 times out of 20, this is what OCD is, or this is what this is, or this is what depression is, or anxiety, and the context of this is that like what's happening for the most part is people are going, they have hypotheses going in, and there's confirmation bias, and then you're setting things out, and then you're kind of confirming what is already known and what is kind of already confirmed, and maybe taking, assuming that everything is kind of true so far, and then taking it one step further.
Yeah.
but that's so incredibly flawed. And I think for me, the piece of this, so it's like kind of how we've been speaking about before, like for me from the time I was 12, I was like, something's going on in my brain and I'm so different from everyone else. It was very cognitivized. It was very like concrete at that point. I think I'd always felt that. But when I was 12, it was like, holy shit, like I can't stop my mind from spinning what's wrong with me and kind of going constantly through like insecurity places and you're constantly putting yourself down and then trying to like drag yourself back up, but then falling back down inevitably because you ultimately have these underlying beliefs already at that point of like, I'm less than, I'm not as much as others, there's something defective wrong about me. And so having that piece of like this belief system that's just constantly there, but then we're in society constantly needing to appear like things are fine. And that element is so hard to speak to because I think it's so easy, people will just say, oh, well, just be authentic. Kind of like you were saying, right? Like there's so much of this movement right now, just be authentic.
Yeah.
But the context is that when you're really struggling, you don't have words. Like I didn't have any words to express what I was going through. I didn't know what I was going through. And so to try to bring up things that you're insecure about with other guys, friends, like when does that happen when you're kind of the bros together? And I say that as somebody who's been really lucky to have some fantastic friends, but the same context, like we didn't have words to communicate these things, so you just end up in your own world. So that piece, and then kind of for me as I got older and things got worse for my mental health, especially as I became 20 and kind of it really kind of going through that whole period, was that like I started to work with different professionals at that point at 19, 20. So I started to work with a psychologist, psychiatrist, family doctors, these specialists, right? These experts who are going to help me understand what's going on psychologically in my brain. But they didn't. They couldn't. They didn't have the tools. They had these very kind of large containers of generalized anxiety or major depression or whatever it is, but they couldn't help me understand, okay, well, why when I'm stressed do my intrusive thoughts start spinning more? Why does that happen more? Why do I have certain themes of intrusive thoughts that come up more than others? What does that mean? Where does that come from? You know, why is this anxiety there in the first place? Why am I struggling with this? Everybody around me says, oh, well, it should be, look, your family's great, everything should be fine. What are you going on about? Mm-hmm. And so you get further shamed in this process. You kind of go through it and through these, and then you get, try group therapy, and here's a CBT, and you try mind over mood, and you go through all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But you just, at the end of it, you end up feeling like this internalized sense of shame further because it's like, why isn't it working for me?
Yeah.
Why haven't I broken through? I've done all these things the experts say. I've been open with the experts say, but I'd be open with the experts and then I'd see at certain moments and then pull away. And I've always been so perceptive. The word that would be applied by a lot of others to me in that context would be sensitive. I struggle still with that label, with that box, but very perceptive, like in terms of reading body language and reading like I know when I'm having a connection, like I can feel that. When somebody pulls away, like you can feel that. But in the context of the medical model, it's like when the expert pulls away, it's because the expert is pulling away, and there's a very kind of implicitly judgmental component to it of like, oh wow, they don't know, I'm too much for them. I'm too, they can't understand, they can't support me, they're kind of, and so that element of just like, okay, well something must really be wrong with me now. And I think that's kind of the underlying roots of what brought me to humanism, is that element of like, all of these experts, all of these models, I went to school to try to understand myself, and I guess that's the stereotype often with therapists, yeah. But to understand myself, and I went through, I'm looking at all the textbooks, and it's like, these are kind of these nebulous, generalized theories of kind of, okay, this is generally this, and if you have these 17 categories of symptoms, then you're in this diagnostic box. And it's like, but this isn't explaining anything. This isn't helping me say, oh, this is why I'm struggling. This isn't challenging the shame. This isn't helping me kind of go to the levels I need to go to. And simultaneously they're acting like, well, we've kind of come up with the greatest model. So there's, we got CBT and it works in all these cases. This is it, the message again. So I think that's like from a visceral standpoint, kind of what brought me here is it just like, no, and yeah.
It's interesting in the moment. I've heard aspects of the story, but it's interesting when you pull it out now. I hear this version, as you said, when you started off this kind of journey of talking about it, where I have never really seen you on this journey, which brings a lot of sadness, but almost like empathy, but this sort of awareness that, you're at a place where, it's sad because the only containers I had when I'm struggling in the darkness growing up is the containers of the medical model, or the studies that, they're saying, oh, we've conducted all these gold standard studies without looking at the qualitative factors like attribution bias, or, some of the things of like, oh, I must be this must be the symbol or the model that I fit into. And then when it doesn't work, as you said, you're almost further shamed. You're like, now I've gone and relied on this expert. I'm not the expert. They're the expert. I'm the one with these deficiencies that I want to get rid of. They can be prescribed and treated in this very medicine-like model, and yet it's not working. So now when I hit humanisms, it's like, wow, it's kind of like freeing, but also in a sense the light and the shadow. It's also really overwhelming to be like, wow, now I have to be on this quest to find making order the chaos for myself. And what does that mean? Right?
That's it.
And we, it's interesting when, not to dovetail off the story, but like, when you look at all the research, the meta-analysis, and most all the important stuff is just common factors, is that there's this tendency for us to want to make sense of something. Make order of the chaos.
Totally.
And the only way my clients also come to me and other people come to me is that they're speaking the same language given to them by the medical model because they have no other language to speak.
That's it.
And they have no other ways to see themselves.
That's it.
But through this. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that as you were telling your story, it was like, wow, I really it was really scary and alone to be in the darkness, but it was also light in the darkness. It was freeing to know that I could start to build who am I,
this is it,
and what containers or mirrors or am I going to see myself in the world.
It's so interesting. There's so many pieces to that, and I feel like we could dovetail into 4 different directions.
I think one of the interesting questions that hits me is we're talking about how we both coming to humanism or coming back to this humanism type of thing, and why we would have been great connectors into developing a connection with each other, which was really cool because I think we met over a couple years, mostly in a pub at a location that we both agreed upon would be okay, while looking over our shoulder to see who the fuck is listening to us right now talk about some of this crazy stuff.
Is the boss around?
Where's
Sandra?
Looking over our shoulder, being like, what is going on? But I think that was really cool because over a series of years, over week to week to week, every sort of Monday night, we started to, through our connection, see ourselves, deconstruct our own categories. And if you take the frame that the only way we know ourselves is through others, good, bad, extroverted, introverted, it's just a mere comparison from me to you. We need others to see ourselves again.
We do.
So that's why this whole psychotherapy works. Is people are wounded in social relationship. They're coming to see themselves through us to get the space. But a lot of the psychotherapy, we don't allow people to see space. Because we get afraid of where they're going.
That's it.
Because it's challenging our models.
It is.
And so for me and you to deconstruct how we're seeing each other with no model also leads us to a place where we can see ourselves through each other, if that makes any
totally
kind of
does.
sense.
Totally does. It made me think of one of the times we were hanging out when I was talking about something that was coming up for me in a friendship, and you were kind of, you had this initial impulse to kind of jump in and maybe comfort me or whatever it was, and then you kind of took a step back. You were just like,
Is this when we were doing psychedelics?
yeah, it totally was.
Okay.
Totally was. Yeah,
Yeah.
This was the
Okay.
mushroom trip. Yeah. And then you took that step back, and you're like, hey, I'm realizing that like that's not what you need right now. You're just looking to be witnessed with where you're at. And it was so interesting because it's like it was almost like we had a pattern of communication that maybe neither of us had signed up for.
Yeah.
But both of us had somehow ended up in that pattern where it was like you say something and then it's like the friend comes in and says the comforting thing. And it's like this pattern that just built in, but then you broke it in that moment. I said, wait a second, I'm realizing you don't even need that. And it was in that moment that I felt the most seen. Because it was like giving me that space to just kind of be there. And it was still very compassionate because you're still like, you're asking questions and you're getting curious, but ultimately you're just giving me that space to kind of be where I was at. And that was what was so powerful, is that I was expressing a lot of emotion. It would be automatic to kind of maybe try to comfort, but maybe part of that comforting unconsciously that we do with one another sometimes is about our own discomfort. It's about, okay, we're seeing that another person experience a lot of emotions. That brings up a lot.
Yeah.
That's hard to sit in a room with somebody who's going through a lot, whatever the emotions are. That's a lot. That will challenge you no matter who you are in the deepest ways.
I think you know it's interesting. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm projecting this onto you, but
Okay.
I almost think that you in that service did a mile of that when I did like maybe a foot of that. Not allowing the emotions your emotions to take out
Right.
outside what's going on from someone else. It's like, you know, in university they're never going to prepare us for what they're going to see. They're like, oh, if clients, you know, immediately at risk, then you follow this model legally and ethically.
Yeah.
But don't worry about it. You follow this protocol, you should be good. Then you get into people's shadows and you see people scream cry.
This is it.
You see people dissociate.
Yeah.
You see people banging their head.
Yeah.
You see people with track marks on them.
Yeah.
They don't ever tell you that you usually in your life aren't going to just sit there and witness this and give people space and all of that and not start to get frantic and make it about you.
Yeah.
Right? In your own personal life.
Well,
And so there's like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, when I project this onto the students come to me, but like, I know they're going to get in the water. I know they're going to see things that they can't see before. And so it's so easy for us as therapists or on the other side or another friend to make it about us.
So
To be like, oh, you're grieving. Oh my God, that makes me feel bad.
This
So
is it.
let me give you advice or
This
let
is
me
it.
get you to stop. And
let me get you to stop.
yeah, empathy is so hard.
It's so hard because it is so scary. And I think that's the piece, is that it is so scary. It's like, okay, I don't know, like this client is not doing well right now. Like the suicide is, they're talking about suicide, but like, okay, we are moving, you know, towards a safety plan in a way that like we're finding some language, but there's still so many unknowns.
Yeah.
And to be able to sit with that is so terrifying that it kind of pushes us often towards that distancing.
I allowed myself to get trained with maybe that people had PhDs in this field and were profs, but never did this work.
Right.
Never actually went down into the darkness.
They were so smart they didn't need to.
Exactly. Spoke about it like there's this system you follow and you just try your best to ignore it.
Mhm.
You know, F your emotions. I didn't even know as a therapist that. First of all, I didn't know countertransference existed until I thought it was an archaic idea from cokehead Freud. You know, back when I got taught.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that my emotions absolutely 100% matter
Of course they
to
do.
the clients and the issues
it.
that are going to make me see myself
This is it.
as much as I'm going to do that. And
This is it.
I just don't think a lot of people my profs were going down or willing to look at themselves.
Yeah.
To be
That's
like,
it.
why do I jump in?
Which is
Why do I
just
get advice?
wild. And I think that's the piece that's so damaging in our profession but not spoken to.
Yeah.
Of just like, we have all these experts, but then this unwillingness to go deep into our shadows and speak about our shadows.
If you think that, you know, once all the results were in, I think Roger's probably dancing in his grave right now. Like, you know, as much as when I went to school and was told, you know, forget what you want to practice inside, you need to bury that shit, because,
Right.
you know,
Right.
if you're not doing behavioral exposure and people aren't getting
Right.
better to do
What's
things,
the SUD score?
they're
Yeah.
not functional, which
Yeah.
functional is submitted at DSM-4 at the time, or 5,
Yeah.
then what's the point of doing this?
Yeah.
You're not giving them anything.
Right.
Get them back to doing in the light. Get them back
To doing
what,
in the light.
what
That-
society needs.
That
them
hits
to
me.
do.
Yeah.
They need to be functional to do what this system needs them to do.
Right.
You know, even act like, you know, I know it's based upon values, but like usually like diffuse from the
This is
shadow
it.
stuff.
Right. Diffuse.
And I always had buried it down, so
Right.
for me it was easy.
It becomes automatic because we're already burying it, dissociating, avoiding, numbing. We're already doing all of that. And so
Yeah.
it's like so often some parts of the different approaches will kind of lead us further to that.
Well, and if you look at it, like, you know, Carl Rogers dancing in his grave,
Yeah.
to what all the factors and meta-analysis cause, you know, change.
Yeah.
I think empathy, obviously, probably number one, empathetic understanding, but
Yeah.
number two, definitely, a therapist's genuineness,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 100%.
And like,
Yeah.
how do you, if specific technique and approach, you know, isn't statistically in a meta-analysis that accounts for any variance that really makes any such of a difference, and
Yeah.
therapist genuineness does,
Yeah.
does that mean that for me to be more genuine as a human, having gone down my own shadow, I
Yeah.
can hold space and bring people down as well? Like,
Kind
there's,
of be there with them when they're down there and
Yeah.
on their journey down
yeah, it
Yeah.
almost makes me think again back to that my emotions don't matter when they
Right.
absolutely dictate everything I do
This
with
is
the
it.
client,
This
and
is
every
it.
nerve wrack.
there. This is it.
It's like when my college asks me for like, oh, what additional trainings that specific techniques and approaches don't matter in the research.
Yeah.
All
yeah.
the meta-analysis,
How do
you know.
Yeah.
But what have you done there?
Right.
It's like I want to say, well, I'm now on these human quests
Yeah.
to be a more genuine human being.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't actually want to read
That's it.
a lot more of the subscribed approaches.
That's
that
it.
There's no difference.
That's it. That's
So
it.
why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What is going on? And
Yeah.
sometimes I don't get this, but I feel like I'm walking around
Yeah.
being disconnected
Yeah.
from this system that really told me I needed to learn more to practice. People have very specific issues, and I got to write them a specific prescription.
Right.
Man, a lot of them are doing the same thing. They're just trying to figure out who they are in the darkness, given all the containers they've been given.
Yeah.
And they got to let some of that go. But I got to be a more genuine human to do that.
This is it. It hits me as you say that, an element of like the genuineness and authenticity. And I was thinking about that a couple of weeks back of just like, nobody thinks they're being inauthentic. So maybe almost like as a question for you with that, like,
Yeah.
nobody thinks they're inauthentic. So it's like, so in that context, you know, you ask almost anybody, it's like, oh, are you being, you know, inauthentic? I'm like, of course not. Like, I'm, you know, like,
I'm being yeah.
so
Yeah.
how would we kind of explain maybe what we mean when we talk about inauthenticity?
It's funny, a part of me is trying to search for, you know, what is the definition of authenticity, and then
Yeah.
what would be
Yeah,
the, you know, the antithesis to that,
Yeah.
like inauthenticity.
yeah,
And then a part of me is like, you know, from inner wisdom,
yeah,
for me is like, it's kind of a ridiculous question to begin with,
Yeah.
because at times
yeah,
where I was less so my human self, I was still a version of myself.
yeah.
I think I was a version of myself to the outside part, the persona, the mask.
Like at some of the hardest points you're saying
Yeah.
in your life yeah,
I think I was inauthentic to my shadow.
Yeah.
I was inauthentic to, oh my God, this person's, you know, scream crying on the floor. That feels anxious. I was inauthentic to that because
Yeah.
I would bury that.
Yeah.
That emotion doesn't need to be there.
yeah,
I was more authentic to my outside part, where it's like, quickly go to the thing that gets them to stop that.
right, yeah, because
Right.
of the discomfort that's coming up. It's interesting, that piece too, because I was thinking about that when you were saying it before, and it's
Yeah.
like that fear that's inside, like that's also very fair. Like it makes
Yeah.
sense. It's like, okay, what if something bad happened? How is that going to impact? Like I went through this thought process. So every time that in my first number of years, every time there was anything close, it's like, okay, I've dotted all the T's and like I've crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. I've done everything I can think that I should do, but at the same time, it's like that anxiety is there in the background, and that anxiety is fair because it's like, you know, at the time I was working for a massive corporation that has specific, like, they don't care what a truth of a situation is. If something looked bad for them, like, you're gonna be gone. That's part of the system that we've all we're all living in.
Yeah, it is such a question that kind of stands out to me. Is
Yeah.
what is being authentic?
Yeah.
Not only just as a person, but as a therapist, and what's not being inauthentic. And there's some version of yourself that's going to be authentic. It's either going to be the version that's protecting you
Yeah.
on the outside from the judgment, as you saying,
Yeah.
to say, oh shit, like I'm feeling the judgment.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
how much you sort of allow, I think, the inner feeling to dictate, how authentic you allow it to sort of come out,
Yeah.
is the inauthentic thing I felt.
Right.
Was that I never really knew, I never had any read or spotlight to really what's going on for me past, oh my God, I feel like an imposter.
Right.
I should never feel that way.
Right.
Keep going back to a model that's been given to you.
This is
Because
it.
this model promises you,
Right.
either it might not be symptom reduction, it might be, unattaching for those symptoms, but
Yeah.
it'll promise you a better life.
This is
At
it.
least the more about, it'll promise you something.
It'll promise you something. It'll promise you greater confidence, less fear in sessions because you'll know the approach, you'll know the way.
And because I think therapist genuineness, now that I'm thinking and processing about it,
Yeah.
the idea that hits me
Yeah.
is that I can't remember at the top of my head, but like, people open up to other human beings.
Yeah.
We know that as a truism to the field.
Yeah.
Is that if you're more human, you're going to be more confident.
Yeah.
People are going to read that you're not putting on a facade.
Right.
You're not
Right.
armoring up.
Right.
You're not talking clinically to them.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you're treating them like you're on their playing field. They
Yeah.
can trust you,
Yeah.
right? That's all human genuineness, right?
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
reason this doesn't work is because if I'm attached to you and parts of you are reading in the room, right? Do I trust this person? Is this person going to judge me, right? Is this person
Mhm.
going to hurt me?
Right.
Can I reveal what's going on to them?
Right.
Your system is read so clearly, like us, we're the ultimate social creatures, to be getting quick reads from me.
Yeah.
Is what is he doing?
Yeah.
Why is he looking away?
Yeah.
Why is he reading a mindfulness
Oh my
script on
goodness.
his computer?
Yeah.
Why is he pretending to be something he's not?
Right.
Why is he starting to talk like he's talking from a textbook?
Right.
And this is why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
because it's not the model, it's because we're not bought into the model.
Yeah.
It's not human.
Yeah. We can't be bought it.
So,
we
The reason
yeah.
this all works is because if I say, listen, I know you're experiencing this, I genuinely care about you.
Yeah.
I don't know where we go with this,
Yeah.
but let's do that together.
This is it.
And I
That's
believe
humanism.
that
Yeah.
it's not just what I'm saying, your nonverbal skills of
Yeah.
being so socially connected. To find yourself through me,
Yeah.
you're feeling it.
This is it.
And because we never feel it, because we're constantly having to progress different levels, it's like,
Right.
maybe the kingdom of Scientology, you never get to the
Right.
the beta, whatever they call them.
Right. Except Tom Cruise.
Yeah, you never get to the, to the knowledge that you seek.
Yeah.
Is that you never genuinely comes from you. It's
Yeah.
not your model.
Yeah.
So it's
Exactly.
destined to fail because the
Yeah.
person's going to think, wow, are they saying this because I'm wrong? Why are they talking to me like this?
Right.
Why are they reading a script?
Right.
Why do they seem to be stumbling through this?
I love what you're saying, and one piece that jumped out at me a lot was that when you were saying that, like, you have to, like, a person feels when you're seeing yourself as being at the same level as them, or seeing yourself as being at a level higher. And I think that's where I take so much issue with the medical model and titles. Because a title right off the bat, it implies this. And it's at the root of our medical system.
We do this right on the console, like when people,
Yeah.
get us for 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think stands out for me, what you're saying, is the way they search even us on Psychology Day is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
All the search criteria is, what is the deficiency you have?
Right. Yeah.
How are you the one on your scroll screen that has something that suggests this person doesn't have it?
Yeah. Yes,
On
yeah.
our side,
Yeah.
how do you have these fancy letters that get rid of
Right.
specifically the thing that you don't have? It already puts us at a just position towards coming in and I'm the expert.
Right.
I have the fancy degrees on the wall.
Yeah.
You're the wounded one.
Right.
I don't experience this,
Yeah.
but I have some answer that I can go get on the boat and I can clearly give it to you.
Yeah.
I have some techniques that you
Yeah.
can probably look up on the internet
Yeah.
for free,
Yeah.
right? Why are you here?
Yeah.
It's like it's already put in, you're the wounded one,
Yeah.
and yet, half my caseload being therapist,
Yeah.
I can guarantee we also are just as human as the people that see us.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? We
Yeah.
have the extra side scroll that says we experience these things as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, it's so interesting. What a place where my mind was going as you were talking about that was, you were saying like how we present these. Okay, the clients come in and say, okay, well, I have OCD, I have anxiety. Okay, this therapist also works with OCD and anxiety, but we're not presenting who we are and our stories because. And what hit me is this experience I had last November when I reached out to this clinic in Montreal on a recommendation and the clinic I was asked, okay, I was looking for somebody to finally kind of help, like, who had OCD, who could help me work on my OCD, who had that lived experience, who wasn't sitting in that expert role. And so I asked, hey, do any of your therapists, this is an OCD specializing clinic, do any of your therapists have OCD? That, as I'd like to work some with OCD, and then I got back, Dr. Zuckerman is an expert in, I forget the last name exactly. Oh yeah, totally. Is an expert in OCD. It's like, I just asked the question in email. It was one sentence.
Yeah.
It was, I think two, because I described a little bit that I knew I needed somebody with where I was at in the process who had lived experience. But instead, I got this scripted response back of, the expert, Dr. Zuckerman has the experience, like, is the expert in the field. It's like, Dr. Zuckerman doesn't know shit about OCD if they don't have it.
Yeah.
Like they can read it whatever they want in the book, but they don't understand what that experience is unless this is something that they live with. And so either they live with it and they're not telling and then being inauthentic in that context of kind of maybe masking and hiding that when somebody's asking very directly, is this something that's possible?
I think it goes back to what you just said. Maybe a part of it, if that rings true for you, is that we tend to cast people in the darkness, but then we tend to prescribe other people way in the light.
Mm.
Dr. Zuckerman has this really well experienced he is the expert.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're in the darkness, right?
Yeah.
You're the one that, doesn't need any attention,
That's it.
right? Because the answers aren't inside you. And I mean, I don't have all the answers. That's what I love about not being the expert,
Mm-hmm.
is that I can alleviate myself,
Yeah.
because I don't think clients are coming to me to actually be the expert
Right.
of their experience. They're looking to me to become, in myself, the non-expert,
Yeah.
so I back the fuck up,
That's it.
so they can
That's
see themselves enough
That's it.
through me.
Yeah. It's
Not easy,
No.
because
not
we're
easy.
all having an ego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're been trained in universities to almost be this integrative, like, spitting out treatment protocols and be this
Totally.
expert and have lots of worksheets ready to go.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's what people actually, when you truly look at the common factor research,
Yeah.
are actually looking for. I think they're looking for themselves. And the only way to find it is to get to know someone who's not going to judge you
And
and criticize. And when people say non-judgmental, they talk about it as, and I was with a university prof, and he said, non-judgmental stuff, your student, that should be a basic value set. And I'm like, well, describe how that's basic. For him to non-judge
Right.
means he also doesn't get to
Yeah.
evaluate,
Yeah.
assess,
Yeah. Create distance. Yeah.
and implement.
Yeah.
Implement something
Yeah.
that he's in a you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if you're taking a non-judgmental stance,
Yeah.
it's like going to, you know, the longest standing peer-to-peer or peer community like AA, right?
Yeah.
Is you go in and you're giving nobody judgment.
Yeah.
It's a protected community.
Yeah.
And people are able to say the darkest things about their experience in
Yeah.
a safe way because they know they're not going to get
Yeah.
judged.
So powerful.
So there's this whole weird thing about the field is saying these things that are our tenets and they're very basic.
Yeah.
We don't actually know how to fucking do them,
Yeah.
but we're going to pretend that they're there,
Yeah.
and we're still going to assess and deliver you from the light
Yeah.
that needs to happen, and forget putting light on yourself that you actually have any answers
Yeah.
to contribute.
Yeah.
Or they say we'll meet you 50-50, we'll make it non-judgmental, but then we'll assess. And that to me in the moment, the idea is like,
Yeah.
well, how can you have it 50-50?
Right. Right.
If,
It hits me on so many levels, like what you're saying around that, and I think that piece of like when you're saying how like most people you think are just looking for that space where they can develop their own story and to get to know their own story, to speak to it, to put words to it.
yeah. I gotta be careful too, because I feel that I get angry at the field, but mostly as I recognize it's just my own anger projected to me.
Okay.
Because I feel angry about how I was a product, a proponent of this field,
Which is healthy to feel angry about that. Yeah.
and a supervisor,
Yeah.
and someone who trained people
Mm-hmm.
in a very medicalized
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as I'm speaking and processing, the beauty is like, yeah, it's not, I'm just angry at it happening still.
Yeah.
I'm angry because I spent lots of years of my own suffering, but the
Yeah.
suffering of others,
Yeah.
thinking this was sort of a science I could just figure out,
Right.
find this perfect formula, and alleviate
This is it.
people.
Yeah, that's it. And that piece of like telling, you know, the story and like, of course, that's what we need.
Yeah.
You know, that and as you speak to that, as opposed to being told who we are